Okay, hello. Time for another Classy UI update. I talked to a few people, amongst those some previous colleagues who has shown an interest in the project, and both developers and designers. And that's super helpful to kind of like one thing is the technical solution, but also like what's the API, what do we want to focus on, and there's so many details to projects like this. So one of the first things we got feedback on was that we called it the design system at your fingertips, but it's not really the design system. Design system is kind of like a word that's being thrown around, including us throwing it around, because it's not really the design system. Design systems are like big things that's not only technical, it's processes and documentation and lots of stuff. But what we're focusing on is the design tokens. So it's the design tokens at your fingertips. We have also simplified quite a bit now since we're like diverging so much from Tailwind now. We're not even mentioning it like in the introduction, although it's of course it was a huge inspiration. Um, and yeah, we're just talking about the CSS properties being abstracted to design tokens, which is basically what it is. And then we have this picture here where you see a composition and you kind of like get an impression of all the goodness of what Classy UI gives you. Also updated the features a little bit. Yeah, you can read that if you want to. And yes, also added a new sandbox, which doesn't use create React app with macros. It just uses a plain setup so that you get like the normal way of consuming it. Yes. What else? What else? Also, like updated tons of docs here. Blah blah blah. How it works. It's pretty much the same, just updated a little bit. And then we have customizing tokens, because one of the things we tried to do was first we wanted it to be like we just give you everything and you don't have to configure anything. And then we thought, no, it would be really nice to be able to configure. And then we did that, but then it was confusing for people who just wanted to consume it. And it actually took some time for us to land on the CSS properties being the entry point of the tokens. So what we've done now is that we're focusing on this being non-configurable, like you don't have to configure it to use it. And then you rather have explicit documentation about customizing it. And what we've done here now is that you have these tokens exposed to you, which you can change out. And we explain how you do that. And another thing we did is that we don't have all these functions and stuff. So what you rather do is that you can require the default tokens of Classy UI, and then you can like compose that together, like with normal JavaScript. So by default, if you create like a tokens object in your configuration, you're starting from scratch. So you explicitly have to bring in the default stuff that you want. What we've also done is that we allow you to add properties to the tokens. So the value, like typically you would have a string, but you can put that string behind a value property instead, and then you can add whatever you want there, and I'll show you that shortly. Yes, another thing we have done is that we're not talking about this class names property anymore. What we have decided is that we take on the responsibility of producing the class names. So we just have to ensure that we produce all possible CSS for all possible CSS properties, and then you only use these tokens, which by default is defined for you. That's the whole point. Yes, writing a library also updated, because what you can do is you don't even have to, like, if you want to build a library based on Classy UI, or you want to add something to the ecosystem, it can just be an object of tokens. So you can define a set of tokens that other people can require in their configuration, like completely ignoring the defaults of Classy UI. Or you can make it like a configurable tool. So instead of exposing like an object, you can expose like a function. So here we expose a function which takes some colors. Like this could be anything. So the consumer of this configuration would then require your little library, and then they would call this function, and they could then pass whatever you decided they could pass. So you're kind of like restricting what they can manipulate. Yes, also added some documentation on how you can add type documentation when you start composing things together. So here we, for example, compose a button. So what you can do is add this kind of comment, and then whenever that button is consumed, it's possible to hover it and you will see that documentation. And that documentation can maybe have a link to some website where you have some documentation for that button, or it can be just an image of that button, or some text describing how to use that button. The point is that we can actually put all this stuff again on the fingertips. Yes. Also added frequently asked questions. Yes. I missed one thing here, but anyways, related to getting the type documentation working. Also updated the install stuff, because you don't manually add the CSS anymore, because Classy UI puts it in there for you. We have not solved Next.js stuff yet. Haven't had time to look at that. And then also simplified the rest of the documentation here. So now it's focused on this compose thing. You have your pseudo decorators, you have your screens, which has also changed a little bit now. Oh, this is wrong. These breakpoints shouldn't be there. So all you do now to define the screens is to have a function with CSS, and then you add the breakpoints directly in the definition. There's no tokens for breakpoints anymore. It doesn't seem to be necessary at all. I'll fix that documentation. And then we have themes. Great. So let's have a look here now. If I start this thing, we can look a little bit more. So we have, let's see, we have something running here. Yeah, so we have that stuff, and if my extension host is running, it is. Background color, gray 500, and yeah, there's nothing changed here really. What I wanted really to show you is if I go into Classy UI config, I can go in here and I can say tokens require Classy UI / tokens. And then we are going to add the tokens. We are going to override a color here. So we tokens.colors, and then we're going to override 500, and we're going to say that's that value is red, and we're also going to give the description. This is the primary thingy. Okay, so when I restart this now, it oops. Oh yeah, it's .default. I always forget that. I think we should be good now. Yes, so now the types should have been written. And if we go in here and look at red 500, you can see here that, first of all, we see that it's a variable, and we see that the description popped up here directly, which is pretty cool. Yes, so we have some other plans as well. There's so many ideas popping up with this, but we should really focus on improving the error messages now. We also need to go through build systems to give good explanations on how to use the different build systems, because it's like partly a plugin and partly it produces CSS. So there's some complexity there, though. Like in practice, it's very simple, but it's nice to have some nice guides for it. So errors and testing build systems will like be the focus for the next iteration. And of course, we'll play around with other stuff. For example, I'm going to, I found a guide on how you download design tokens directly from Figma. So I want to download them from a Figma project, put them directly into the classy UI config and see what happens. Maybe it makes sense, maybe it doesn't, who knows. But that will be super exciting. Yes. But anyways, I hope you like this release and we'll keep working on it. And please give us feedback on what's working, what's not working, and we'll hopefully have a release very soon. Bye-bye.